I'm Frances Rahaim, and this is Basslines, a special place where we make time to reminisce. We'll take you behind the scenes with celebrities like Frank Sinatra, Peggy Lee, Johnny Carson, and more, through stories told right from the man's mouth who worked with them. So cozy up, turn the cell phones off, and please welcome into your hearts my friend, professional bassist, conductor, and teacher, Mr. Don Baldini.
Hi, Frances.
Hey, Don. Happy holidays.
Nice to be here. Same to you.
Thanks.
Nice to be here again.
Who can we talk about today?
Oh, I don't know. I could tell you a Thanksgiving story.
Oh, perfect.
First of all, let me explain one of the ways the music business works and how people get hired. There's something called a contractor. The contractor is usually under contract to whomever, be it NBC or a particular theater or a particular studio like MGM. And that contractor is responsible for hiring the musicians. So the contractor at NBC in Burbank, California, where the Carson show was shot, was a guy named Al Lappin. He was an old vaudeville drummer from New York, tough as nails. He had a grip like a vice, I think he lived to be maybe close to 100. He also founded the International House of Pancakes, which is a little aside. That would usually be enough for most people, but that was like a side. I don't think he had it very long, then he sold it. But he made a lot of money, I know that.
IHOP.
Yeah,
IHOP.
Yeah.
And the Carson show we're talking about is the Tonight Show, Johnny Carson.
The Tonight Show, the
Right.
Johnny Carson Tonight Show. So we all would enter the studio through a certain door for help, basically.
Sure.
So I'm coming through the door, and this was on a Thanksgiving day, and the regular bass player, Joe DeBarlo, may he rest in peace, took off because he had a family and kids and wanted to be home, and I was single. I was the first call sub on the show, so he asked me if I would do the show on Thanksgiving, and I said sure. So anyway, I go walking in the door, and Al Lappin is waiting right there. You never saw him until the actual show. And the first thing he says to me is, "You used to play the violin." And I said, "Yes." He said, "Well, we got a violin for you." I said, "Al, I haven't played the violin for 30 years.
You're playing this thing, right?
I'm playing this thing."
Yeah, exactly.
And he said, "That's all right. You'll be perfect." I said, "What's this about?" He said, "Don't worry. We'll tell you when you get on the set." So I go on the set, and here's this rented violin, what unfortunately didn't even have a chin rest. It was just an instrument and a bow. It was a very cheap instrument.
Well, Johnny Carson, they couldn't afford a good violin on that show.
I think they just got it from some rental company. Anyway, so Johnny's on the set, which he never was. I got introduced. That was my one and only time to actually meet him.
Even though you were in the band.
He was always in the band.
Toured with him, yeah.
He never was at the rehearsals. I mean, half the time he would show up, he'd park his Corvette 5 or 10 minutes before makeup.
Really?
Yeah, we never saw him. So anyway,
no rehearsals for his shows.
Well, we only
for
rehearsed.
him.
We only rehearsed if there was an act on the show that needed music.
Fair enough.
But we never rehearsed with Carson. All right, so now he's on the set. He explains to me, "I'm doing a tribute to Henny Youngman." And Henny Youngman was an old Borscht Belt. If people don't know what the Borscht Belt was basically a bunch of hotels in the Catskills that primarily had a Jewish clientele. And they were famous. Lots of people made their bones, so to speak. Eddie Fisher and people like that came up through the Catskills. So Henny Youngman was a Catskills comedian. He used to play the violin, play a couple of bars, and then he would tell a joke. So what Johnny wanted me to do was play a couple of bars. Johnny would tell a joke. So I said, okay, I could. So I said, what do you want me to play? He says, well, Henny always played Smoke Gets in Your Eyes. Now, I got to explain something because this is an integral part of the story. The standard pop tune form is A-A-B-A. The B section is what we call the bridge. The A sections are basically the tune that everybody remembers.
That's right.
So I said to Doc Severance, who was the band leader, I said, so you want me to play Smoke Gets in Your Eyes? Well, of course, I started playing and it was atrocious because they set me up because they did it like in D flat. Ooh. And that's a horrible key for the violin.
Yes.
So I'm going like, and Carson goes, that's perfect.
That's what they
and
wanted.
it was horrible. I mean, it was horrible. So we're doing it now, and we're like, you know, and Carson turns to me and says, how come it doesn't sound like it did before? And I said, well, it's going to take another 30 years. I'm starting to get it back. So what they did was, we're doing the show live. I'm live on camera right next to Johnny.
Yep.
And Doc Severn says to me, go to the bridge. Well, then I went like, da, da, rah. And Johnny, of course, started laughing, and he got what he wanted. He got this horrible, well, the aftermath was that because I was on camera, I suddenly now get a check from not only the Musicians Union, but AGVA, the American Guild of Variety Artists. To put it bluntly, I made about $2,500.
What was your normal pay without being
for
on
that show
next to Johnny?
For one show, about $250.
Wow, so
but
10
it was a
times
holiday,
as
so
much.
it paid double.
Yep.
And I'm sure AGVA had the same idea.
Yeah.
So needless to say, Joel DeBartolo never took off another Thanksgiving, the whole run of the show. But it was really funny. And Carson gives me, you know, he used to do that to the comedians. At the end of the bit, he goes like this, which means like, yeah.
Then you really
So
knew.
I thought, and I've looked and looked and looked. I cannot find a rerun of that show. It's got to be out there somewhere.
We should say that. Somebody's got this on YouTube or somewhere.
Somebody.
If anybody's got a clip of this, please send it to us. I mean, I've known you long enough to know everything you say is verifiable. And who could make up a story like that?
Yeah, it was pretty funny.
But you were a good sport about it.
It was pretty funny, yeah, I was.
Yeah.
But, you know, it was a chance to interact with Johnny Carson, which, how many chances do you get to do that in your life?
Now, that's an interesting point. You played in Johnny Carson's orchestra with Doc Severinsen.
I was the first call sub.
Yeah.
Meaning whenever Joel didn't do it.
Right.
But in those days, Doc would take the rhythm section with him and go to Las Vegas or go on a tour. So I did it a lot. I did it. I don't know. I remember getting residual checks when somebody bought all of that when Carson retired. And I got about, 850 or 900 checks.
Wow.
But they were all for like $12 or, and I had to sign every one of them.
Yeah.
It took me weeks before I finally deposited all those checks because there were so many of them. But yeah, so I did it a fair amount.
So that's how
years.
You spent that Thanksgiving being a good sport playing violin.
Yeah.
For Johnny Carson as Henny Youngman. I wish I was better at jokes, but I just saw a clip of Henny Youngman, really the king of one-liners.
Exactly.
And that's how people knew him.
Take my wife.
Take my wife.
Someone take
Please.
my wife.
Right, exactly. But he had a lot of clever material. We know the things that he said over and over
one of the
again.
ones I always remember, and he would look at his suit, and he would talk about, the guy that cut the cloth and the guy that sewed it together. He said, there's a lot of people making a living off something I haven't paid for yet. That kind of stuff. Henny Youngman talked about real life stuff, as did Jerry. Jerry Seinfeld, I wouldn't be surprised if he went to the Catskills as a little boy.
Yeah. I was just having a conversation with somebody about Henny Youngman versus who gets no respect? Rodney Dangerfield. Yeah.
Oh, I love Rodney Dangerfield.
So I just heard Rodney Dangerfield do something that was very clever that I thought, boy, that was right in Henny Youngman's camp, but Dangerfield puts a different spin on it. And he tells this story. You can usually see this stuff coming, but so fast that he catches you, right? He tells this story about my wife doesn't like to do, a lot of things, so I bought her an electric washer and an electric dryer, and she's got an electric stove, and she started to complain that there's not enough room to sit down. So what do? I bought her an electric chair, right? So that stuff was classic from that period, and I think the comedians we have today all learned from that.
Well, you're bringing up an interesting point. Years ago, I lived in Indianapolis, and there was a club there called the Embers, and the guy that ran it was his name was Bill Ball. He was from the Ball family, the Mason jar, the Ball jar,
right?
Ball State University, etc. Okay, so Bill Ball was kind of like the Donald Trump Jr. of the Ball family.
Oh dear.
The father gave him a bunch of drugstores to run, and so as a hobby, he had this this nightclub called the Embers in Indianapolis, and it was a beautiful club, very classy, maitre d' and all the whole bit. A lot of those guys worked there. So I got to know a lot of those comedians because I worked with a lot of them. And Jackie Leonard, he was another one from that era. Mm-hmm. He used to live down the street from me in Las Vegas. And when he'd see me out cutting the grass, Jack Leonard was a big guy. And he always wore what we used to call a pork pie hat.
Oh, yeah.
It was like a straw hat.
Swinger,
and he had this little dog. I don't know what it was. But Jack Leonard was a big guy. He was probably 6'3" or 6'4", and he probably weighed over 300 pounds. So he was what we would call a formidable figure.
Yeah.
And he'd go walking by my house, and it was always funny because the leash was like straight out to the dog. And he'd come by my house, he'd always have a few lines. So when I was in Vegas, a lot of those guys that I had worked with at the Embers would hang out in certain restaurants, and you'd kind of go there to hang out with them.
Yeah.
And it was absolutely amazing. And those guys are in relaxation just the way they are on the stage. I mean, they all try to one-up each other.
Yeah.
There's tremendous competition. There was a guy in those days named Pete Barbuti. He was a great, great, great musician, worked with a group called the Millionaires. And he came to Vegas with that group and then stayed, and he became a stand-up comedian. He was our opening act with Sinatra for quite a few engagements. Just a hilarious guy. And he had a lot of musical humor. Like he talked about being the third trumpet player in a band. And he would take the tune Shanty in Old Shantytown. He'd say, this was my part. Da 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 da. And then he would play the broom. He would take a broom and he would brush it on the microphone and do da 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 da. We play the tune, but he would do it with the crazy.
That would be
crazy
the rhythm.
Stuff like
he
that.
would play the rhythm on the
he'd play the rhythm with the broom.
Yeah.
And I remember one night, again at the Embers, I would hand him his broom. And one night I decided to be a smartass, and I brought a vacuum cleaner up on the stage. And just how quick they are. And I hand him the vacuum cleaner, and he says, no, man, I don't play the Fender broom, meaning the Fender being an electric instrument.
Yeah.
That being an electric broom, that.
Funny.
I don't know that anybody else
caught it. That's a fast connection, right?
Yeah, but hell, man, I don't play the Fender broom.
Oh, that's funny.
Yeah.
I want to ask you about holidays and time on the road and some other things when we come back. But we'll take a break for just a minute.
Okay.
And when we come back, we'll have more from Don Baldini.
Basslines is sponsored by Hug Your Money, so unique it's patented. Need a little help saving for that rainy day? Your Hug financial coach has got you covered. Hug Your Money, so unique it's patented. Hug Your Money. Hug can help you get your arms around your finances. Hug Your Money, so unique it's patented.
We're back with Don Baldini. Holidays on the road. How tough is it to hold a relationship together? You were traveling a lot.
I was. I remember being in New Orleans and coming home on Christmas Eve and the plane being delayed and having to do Christmas shopping out of town.
Oh, yeah.
And all that kind of stuff. That was tough. That particular time I was in New Orleans with Teddy Wilson, the wonderful piano player that was played with Benny Goodman.
Yeah.
And Al Hurt, the trumpet player, had a club on Bourbon Street called the 500 Club.
Yep.
And Teddy Wilson was his starring act. We were there for, I think, might have been close to a month. I stayed at a place called Mrs. Felton's Guest House, which is where they filmed the movie Walk on the Wild Side.
Oh, no kidding.
Yeah. And there was that song, da-dee-da-da.
Yeah.
Jane Fonda was in that movie. She was like 18 years old or something like that.
She's still...
It was Barbara Stanwyck,
yeah.
Lawrence Harvey,
Wow.
Walk on the Wild Side, yeah. And it was filmed at that place, Mrs. Felton's Guest House. It was an old New Orleans, French Quarter mansion with the big long hallway, and it opened up this beautiful garden. Yeah.
Who was it that you told me always got a room for the band, but there really wasn't a room?
Oh, that was a guy named Tony Turan. He's the famous trumpet player that went da 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 on the Lucy show.
From Lucy.
Yeah, he was a
Lucy.
character. He would always, if you worked like a one-night gig, it was called a club date. And we'd like work a club date at the Beverly Hilton or something, playing for some award show or whatever. And he'd always go up to the desk and he'd say, where's the room for the band? And of course there never was one. But 9 times out of 10 he would get one. He had such a way about it. I'll never forget doing a telethon for, I think it was cerebral palsy, or maybe it was, Easter seals or whatever. And they would, these caterers would provide food. You'd show up on a Sunday morning, because these telethons would go for 2 or 3 days. He'd be there with his whole family.
Yeah.
The food was supposed to be
Like
for
brought
people
them
involved
in
with the
to
show,
come and join.
not your sons and daughters and grandchildren.
Aye.
But getting back to being on the road, that gig in New Orleans, I will always remember it because I was sitting at a table, or in a booth, and Al Hurt was sitting in the booth. This was during our break, and the guy he was sitting with, I later found out, was a man named John Meacham, who was the owner of the New Orleans Saints. They were not even a team yet. They were in discussion. This was in December. I guess the team became a team the following year. And I'll never forget Al Hurt saying to John Meacham, "Yeah, let's call them the Saints, so I could play when the Saints go marching in whenever they come on the field." So
That's
there
how
you
they got
go.
their
I
name?
mean, talk about eavesdropping. A little piece of history.
It's always interesting to me. It would be one thing if you just had these sort of stories where you're the lead character and you're telling stories about yourself. But what fascinates me about you and why I wanted to do the show with you is because the chain reaction between the things that you've experienced is like a clown's pocket. You never know what's coming out. So you started with a guy who had IHOP, right? And now we've moved to Meacham and the Saints. We've gone straight through a number of other things. And it all just sort of rolls around in your head, and the stories just come out. We will never have enough time to get all your stories.
Well, those days, show business was a very incestuous community. I mean, everybody knew everybody.
Yeah, you mean that in the
most
platonic way.
In the most innocent way.
Yes. Yep.
And the thing is that I can remember walking on the streets of Prague and running into somebody.
Really?
And I can also, because I was in a movie for a few seconds. There's a movie with Peter Sellers called Being There.
Ah.
It's based on a Jerzy Kosinski play about a guy who's just in the right place at the right time, or in some cases at the wrong time.
Yeah.
And there's a scene where the lead character, his name is Chauncey the gardener. He was the gardener to a multimillionaire, but they make his name Chauncey Gardner. And he goes on a show like The Tonight Show, and Johnny Mandel, who did the music for the film, is conducting. And we spent a whole day, by the way, doing that one 30-second scene. But anyway, the camera pans the band, and it comes in on me, goes past me, goes to Peter Sellers.
Yeah.
I'm on camera for maybe 5 seconds at the most.
Yep.
But people have walked, that movie is such a cult favorite. People have walked up to me in New York. You were in Being There. I mean,
really?
Don't ask me why that's so memorable.
Isn't that something?
It's just a matter of seconds.
You are recognizable.
Well, and there was a funny reputation in Los Angeles that a lot of the conductors, if we were doing a TV special or something, they had this fantasy that I was always on camera. So we did a special with Reagan, where he was just one of the guys. Again, it was called a tribute to Dutch Reagan. That was his nickname.
Yeah. Before he was President
And
Reagan.
the conductor, Nick Perito, who's also passed away, he said, "I want you in front of me, Baldini, so I'll be on camera." And sure enough, you could go on YouTube. It's on YouTube. I'm on camera like practically the whole show.
That's so funny.
It's just funny that way. I don't know what it was, but anyway.
You're talking about doing music, having music for the shows, and we've had this conversation many times about what if there was no music behind a show.
Oh my God.
How much music means to people.
Well, I can tell you from experience. Jaws, without the music.
You did Jaws too.
I did Jaws too.
Yeah.
And without that, there's nothing.
Yeah.
Think about Psycho without her being in the shower. That weep, 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 weep. You know, think about, and then there's some music. There's some music in
There's a theme
Psycho
here.
where she's driving the car
Yes.
to the motel and it's raining, and there's this kind of like da 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 da. This, but the music has this ominous quality about it.
Yeah.
You know something's going to happen.
Or the music in a love story. You know, sometimes these themes get picked up and taken along. They get a life of their own. We were talking about Henry Mancini. Maybe tell me a story about Henry Mancini.
Again, may he rest in peace. Just the nicest gentleman, just the nicest guy. I mean, with all his fame and the fact that he could have just been an egomaniac, he was just one of the guys. I worked with him when I was in Indianapolis, just out of college. I was there, got a job with the Indianapolis Symphony. And when I was in college, I was part of a band run by a guy named Al Cobain at Indiana University. And we used to have a big weekend called the Little 500, and they would have celebrities come and do a big show. And Mancini and Andy Williams came one year. And so he remembered the Al Cobain band. So he and Andy Williams were doing a tour of basically a little bit of the Midwest and mostly the Southeast, the Carolinas, Georgia, et cetera.
Yep.
And he called Al Cobain to put the band together. And of course, Al Cobain got some of the faculty, you know,
Sure.
Bill Bell on tuba,
He's got the stuff to draw
with the
from.
New York Philharmonic.
Yeah.
Joseph Gingold was the concertmaster of the Cleveland Orchestra under George Zell. Those are the kind of people he got to play in it. And me.
Yes.
And I'll never forget, it was probably 20 years between that and when I saw him again in Los Angeles at a party. And he remembered my name.
Oh.
I mean, Henry Mancini, I'm a nobody to Henry Mancini, and yet he remembered my name. And that was, in fact, you sing a song that I turned on to you.
Oh,
from
Soldier in the
his
Rain. Soldier
film
in the Rain.
Soldier in the Rain.
Yeah.
And I remember of all the great tunes,
Oh.
that's the one he rarely played on his show. That's the one tune he would play on the piano.
Really?
And it's probably one of the least recognized of all his, you know, everybody knows Moon River, Days of Wine and Roses.
Right.
I'll tell you a funny story though. Okay, so he was a piccolo player. He had played, I'm trying to think of what band he played in. It was one of the early dance bands. He was the piano player. But he also, I don't think he played piccolo in the band, but as a kid he played the piccolo. So we're out to dinner one night and we're having Alaskan crab legs. And I'm feeling it, and I said to the guy who was the lead alto player, I can't remember his name, but I said, you know, this crab legs feels a little bit like the piccolo.
Yeah.
And he said, good, give it to me. I got an idea. Hank, we used to call him Hank. He used to play piccolo.
You used to call Henry Mancini Hank.
Hank, yeah.
Oh, yeah. Of course you did.
He used to play piccolo on Baby Elephant Walk.
Oh, yeah.
I think that's what.
I love that you can sing this stuff for people who don't know what this is, but absolutely.
So the deal was, Bob Smith.
That was the
Bob, that was the lead alto player.
alto sax.
And his job was to hand Henry the piccolo. And sure enough, that night at the show, he's got the crab leg instead of the piccolo.
No.
And he hands it to Henry, and Henry doesn't know it's a crab leg, puts it up to his mouth, and of course, nothing happens, and throws it. We used to call him Smitty. He throws it at Smitty, and of course, it bounces up and goes into the piano. Now, Smitty's got to go in the piano and retrieve the crab leg. The audience, of course, is cracking up. And
Is this live?
yeah, live
Oh, my
in front of
gosh.
some, 20,000 people
Ay,
at some
ay.
stadium in North Carolina or something like that. But Hank was a good sport. He was always, good for
Great.
a laugh. And
You know, his daughter is a fabulous
Oh,
vocalist.
fabulous
I don't know if
singer.
people really know her.
And she's
but
married to a
Monica-
famous drummer.
She is?
Yeah, who also worked with Sinatra for a while. Yeah, he's a
Click,
great
click, click.
drummer. And the
6
two of
degrees.
them I'm a big fan of Ennio Morricone, especially the music from Cinema Paradiso.
Yeah.
So they got permission from Morricone before he died to put words. So she and her husband wrote the words to that, one of those love themes.
Really? I'll have to check that out.
Yeah, it's amazing.
Yeah.
Again, incestuous world.
Oh,
The
my
music
gosh, yeah.
business is very, very tight. Everybody literally works with everybody.
So we do know several musicians who have had long careers like your own, just year after year, story after story about being picked up by this show or being asked to play on this thing or being asked to write some music or conduct something. You're a conductor as well as a teacher. That reminds me, if we have time, maybe we'll only have time to start the story, but you conducted for somebody for a long time. And
Connie Stevens.
Yeah, if you'll just tease it just a little bit, just tell us a little bit about that. Maybe we'll make time for a full story
Well,
about
Connie
it.
was a really good friend. I got to know her because I was her bass player for many, many years. And then when I started conducting for her, one of my students played bass for her. So it was a long time as association, I'd say a good 25 years.
Yeah.
And we had a lot of, one very funny story was we were at the Flamingo Hotel.
Yeah.
And that's when, high tech started coming into the music business. In the old days, everything was done. The orchestra was in front of you and the singer was there. Well, in this particular case, her producer got this wild idea to have the rhythm section on stage, but the stage was movable. That in itself spells danger.
Yep.
Okay,
Yes.
danger.
Yes.
So the whole rhythm section is on the stage. The whole string section and the brass and the woodwinds were up in a balcony with a television camera, or rather a television screen, with a conductor on a camera. But here's what nobody figured out. All these great technical minds, right? The camera was on the moving platform that the rhythm section was on.
Oh, no.
So the minute they pulled the platform back, the conductor was out of the range of the camera.
Yeah, of course, yeah.
So she was doing this, I don't know what the heck it was, some big dance number. And you could hear it. The conductor, well, the other thing was, from where he was standing, the curtain hit him on the head. That was the other thing, and almost knocked him out.
Great.
So here we're playing, and you could hear the rest of the orchestra kind of like just peter out because suddenly there's no beat. And, obviously they put the camera somewhere else. Yeah. But with all those rehearsals, and these people get thousands of dollars to come up with this stuff. And to think that now today we have cameras that are more sophisticated.
Yeah.
They would automatically focus.
That's right. Yeah.
But this was, we're talking like the 70s.
Right. Yeah.
So there was no such thing.
I want to thank you for telling us that story. It's all we have time for today. But I know we'll be back. So I just want to say, in the spirit of reminiscence and of the holidays, I'd like to close the show by mentioning that my parents at the holidays had this little trivet, which is on our coffee table. I don't know that anybody will be able to see it, but can you see it? It had the loveliest saying.
You don't have to thank us or laugh at our jokes. Sit deep and come often. You're one of the folks.
Yeah, isn't that nice?
I love that.
That's nice.
That's cute.
So we hope that you'll come back and visit us really soon.
I will.
And for everybody out there, come visit us as soon as you can. Happy holidays.
Have a good holiday and have lots of turkey and have lots of Christmas presents and all that stuff.
You bet. And thank you for watching Basslines.
What would you do with more retirement income? Reliable increased income can be yours without unretiring. Ask your Hug financial coach about guaranteed income today. Hug your money. So unique, it's patented. Busy life, we know how it is. Let us help you maximize, prioritize, and strategize so you can start enjoying your next chapter. Hug your money. So unique, it's patented.